There was drug addiction in my family. For most of my life, I said, I'm never going to become like you. I'm never going to become like you. But the sad reality, friends, is that I not only became like them, I probably became worse. I've been arrested more times than I care to admit. On the impact, I busted up my hip. I broke 4 or 5 ribs. I came within an inch of dying. And I cried out, God help me. And that night has changed my entire life.
Welcome to the One Pebble Podcast. It is my great joy and honor, along with my son and co-host Harris, to introduce Tom Truszinski. Tom is the CEO of Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, a rehabilitation center. Tom is using his own story with drugs to make a tremendous difference and impact in the lives of others. Tom has been married to Carmen for 33 years. They have 4 amazing kids. Tom loves hockey, but I think his greatest joy and love is probably his grandson, who is 2 years old. Tom, thank you so much for being a part of the One Pebble Podcast. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I see that I already started with a problem because I gave you a dated bio. Please forgive me. I got great news. Carmen and I have now made it 36 years, and we have 2 grandsons. So look how things just kind of mushroomed and blossomed just in that short period of time.
Wow.
Congratulations. 36 years is an accomplishment. 2 grandchildren. And tell us a little bit about hockey. We know that you love hockey.
Oh, gosh. I've grown up loving hockey, but that was a sport that only the rich kids could play. And I wasn't a rich kid, so we couldn't play it. Well, you'll hear my story in a little bit, but I started playing hockey when I turned 40. And God did something amazing, made a miracle where I shouldn't even be walking, much less playing hockey. And God took it so far that I had the honor of going to the 2006 Winter Olympics with the U.S. hockey team as their chaplain. And so here I got to skate in Torino, Italy, and it was just awesome. But I love the sport, and I play on Wednesday nights.
Wow, that is amazing that you went to the Olympics as the chaplain. Just an incredible story in and of itself. And that's a huge accomplishment. Not everyone gets asked to do that. I bet that was an incredible opportunity.
It was surreal, but I will tell you that you get more of an Olympic experience here watching it on TV. My experience was like getting on a train in Rochester and riding all the way to St. Paul, going and watching hockey all day, and then riding a train back to Rochester. That's how far the Olympic Village was from the venue. But it was a fabulous experience, and I wouldn't trade it at all.
Someday I want to hear more about that story. Tom, I will say that we wanted to visit with you because we have so much respect for you, your own personal story, your leadership, and the purpose that you have at Teen Challenge. You've taken your own pain and decided that you were going to impact others. You've had a profound impact on the kingdom and on people, and we're so excited to learn more about that. But we also have thought about you so much in follow-up. Now in July, we released an episode with Dr. Scott Abrams, and we had a tremendous response to that episode. I think a lot of people could relate to Dr. Scott Abrams, whether it was an alcohol story, a drug story, maybe it's, we all struggle in different ways, and oftentimes we can relate with struggle. And what Dr. Scott Abrams did is he went to Teen Challenge, and he cannot say enough good things. Dr. Scott, if you haven't listened to his episode, do so. But Dr. Scott speaks the world of Teen Challenge and what that did for him and his family. Tommy's a friend of yours. He thinks the world of you. He admires you greatly. And then Dr. Scott took that pain, put that right into purpose. And we thought of you, Tom. And Tom, you have your own story with drugs. And what you did is you decided, like Dr. Scott, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to help other people. And so we are amazed and beyond proud to lead Teen Challenge. I can't even imagine the responsibility, and you're so humble. You've said a big yes to leading that organization, and you're doing it so well, and we're so proud of you. But what we would like you to do today is we'd like you to share your story. We're excited to be educated by you, informed by you, inspired by you. And we know that you've had a tremendous impact on the lives of others. We're also excited today to learn more about drugs and alcohol and addiction and how we can be informed. I'm a big believer, Tom, if we can be informed, we can join together and make a difference and be stronger. And then lastly, we're really excited to get behind Teen Challenge. We're excited about the work you're doing. Tom, you're saving lives, you're changing lives, and we are so excited to hear more. Harris, before we hear Tom's story, is there anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, just thank you for serving our community. And I have a lot of respect for Dr. Scott Abrams and what I've heard about you and your story. I'm really excited to learn more. So thank you for joining us today.
My honor. My honor. Thank you for having me.
Tom, we'll have you go into detail and share your story with us.
Okay. Well, what I would like to start out with is Romans 8:28. The Apostle Paul says, God works all things for the good of those who love him. And there couldn't be a Bible verse that was more true to me and my story. And what I'm finding is that the more that I share my story, the more that I'm finding out that my story isn't just my story. It actually is our story. That there's actually much more relatability to one another than maybe I originally thought. I was born and raised in St. Cloud, Minnesota, beautiful Stearns County, and I was born to beautiful parents. My mom and dad are wonderful people. Please understand that I believe that and know that with all my heart, and I love them. But I was raised in a home of addiction. My mom and dad were very well known in the area, very upstanding people. But like many of us, my mom and dad had some issues that they actually never dealt with. And back in that day, there wasn't the prevalence of counseling and getting help and being vulnerable and transparent with your issues. Typically, what people did is they bottled them up, and in my mom and dad's situation, they self-medicated. There was drug addiction in my family. My mom was addicted to Valium, and which was prescribed by a doctor. And then they both had severe drinking problems. And what was interesting is that my sister, my only sibling, and I were raised as only children. You wonder how that can be. Well, my sister was actually the nurse at the St. Cloud Hospital the night that I was born. There was nearly 21 years between the two of us, and there's nobody in between us. It's just me and my sister. And the truth is, I'm probably a product of an extra scotch and water one night. And I'm very thankful to be alive. Now, please put a footnote on that, because that wasn't always the way I felt. In fact, I had a large period of my life where I cursed my life. And that brings me almost to tears to think about that, because I love life so much right now. But I was raised in a home where there was abuse, and I'll just leave it there. I thought I was the only one that was facing that abuse. I went to a Catholic grade school in St. Cloud, and as I was in the lunch line, I remember seeing posters for Al-Anon. And it was saying, if you're experiencing this in your home, there is a number you can call. And I know that was just crying out for me, just calling out for me. But you don't do that. You keep everything close at hand, or so we thought. And I grew up in my addiction where sadly, my mom passed out every night, if not almost every night. And my dad, I don't think my dad knew how to handle my mom's drinking because she would literally become another person after 5 o'clock when she would start to drink. And my dad would just leave the house. So I, as a young boy, was left to raise myself. My sister was no longer in St. Cloud. She was not even in the state of Minnesota for much of my life. And it was a very lonely period. It was a very confusing time. It's hard for a young person that is still developing and growing and not having the frontal cortex developed in your brain to realize the truth behind why that person that's your caregiver can all of a sudden abandon you or abuse you or what have you. And I grew up loving my mom and my dad in the daytime, but then actually hating them when they became drunk. And that was hard to reconcile. And for most of my life, I said, I'm never going to become like you. I'm never going to become like you. But the sad reality, friends, is that I not only became like them, I probably became worse. When I was 13 years old, my dad died of lung cancer from smoking. And on the night that my dad passed away, my mom was holding his hand. And my dad's last words were, Ev, my mom's name was Evelyn, Ev, I've always loved you. What a powerful thing for a spouse to hear her dying husband say. I can't imagine what that did to my mom. And dig this, out of everything that my mom could have said back to my dad, Pete, I love you too. Thanks for everything. We'll be okay. Her first words were, and Tommy too. Ev, I've always loved you. And Tommy too. You see, I don't know what kind of a house you were raised in, but the house I was raised in, you weren't allowed to share feelings. Kids were to be seen and not heard. If I wanted your opinion, I would have asked. So my mom never knew that I wanted to have a relationship with my dad. My dad and I really never did anything together. And here was an opportunity that my dad on his deathbed had an opportunity to say, I love you, Tommy. Or, and Tommy too. I'd love to tell you that my dad said one of those things. I would love to tell you, Harris, that my dad looked at me. But what my dad did is my dad turned and he looked out the window. And about 10 minutes later, my dad died. Now, at my age today, I actually do believe that my dad did love me. But I think my dad was probably encountering the fact that he could have done something so much different and he didn't. I would imagine there was guilt and shame that he was facing in that moment. And that pains me because I didn't want my dad in those last moments of his life to feel that. I would rather have him feel joy for knowing the Lord and love for his family that were around him instead of shame and guilt. But a 13-year-old doesn't know those things. And like I say, when my dad died about 10 minutes later, I got really mad. I got mad at God. If you're such a good and loving and awesome God, why would you put me in a home like this? And then I got mad at my dad. Why was I unlovable? Why was I not acceptable? And then at 13 years old, I started to self-medicate myself. At 13, I would start to use drugs and alcohol. It would progress throughout the years. I barely graduated from high school. I graduated with a 1.72 GPA. Now you're saying, hold it. Now this is the CEO of Teen Challenge, a 1.72 GPA. That's a D. That's a D average. Yes, but 1.72, that's like a strong D. Okay, that's like a D plus. Okay, I mean that's really high. But I did graduate, and we were really poor growing up, and so I qualified for grants, and I ended up going to St. Cloud State. And the first quarter, I was on academic probation. Things were not going well for me. But something changed. And I ended up graduating from St. Cloud State with a finance degree, public finance degree, with honors, believe it or not. I ended up going to Mankato State, getting my master's in finance. And I got straight A's, except for one B. Straight A's. But what was interesting, while I was getting those good grades, I was also growing in my addiction. And I was also growing in my criminal record. I've been arrested more times than I care to admit. And my life was growing more and more out of control. So instead of sharing, I held it in. And it festered and it grew. And I ended up getting a job with a finance company out of St. Paul as an intern. And over the next 12 years, I would actually go from being an intern to being an employee to being a vice president and an owner in the company. There was a time when I was in the Wall Street Journal. And that week, I had a group of students from the Carlson School of Management come to interview me. And one gentleman in that group was walking out, and he looked at me and he goes, "I want to be just like you. I want to be just like you." And I probably patted him on the back and encouraged him somehow. But what I really wanted to do is shake him and say, "Dude, run. You don't want to be anything like me." You see, what was true for my parents was true for me. Looks can be deceiving. On the outside, you can look like you have it all together, but in the inside, you can be a total mess. And that's where we have to invite, in my opinion, Jesus Christ to come in and to be that healer and that rebuilder and that forgiver and that restorer. And what that group of students didn't realize is that the weekend before, I had been arrested again by the Eagan and the Apple Valley Police in a joint effort. And what they didn't realize, and what I didn't realize, is that the next weekend I would sit at our cabin in western Wisconsin ready to end my life because I was so sick and tired of the lie I was living. And I'm very happy to say that I didn't follow through on that. But my life was so dark. It was so empty, even though from the exterior it looked like it was all together. It wasn't. Looks can be deceiving. And so what happened is about 2 months later, I figured out what the problem was, or so I thought. I thought it was my wife. I thought she was the problem. You see, everybody else has a problem except for me. That's a typical feeling a lot of people with addictions have. It's the other person's problem, not mine. For me, it was my parents' problem. It was God's problem. It was the judges or the cops or whoever had the problem. And now here I was going to blame it on my wife. And I thought that if I would leave my wife, and at that time we had a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old daughter, if I would leave them, I would be able to find happiness. That's the key. I couldn't have been more wrong. So on May 18th, 1995, just a little over 30 years ago now, I got on my motorcycle at our house in Egan. I drove down my driveway and drove past my wife, who was holding our 6-month-old and our 2-year-old daughters. And I was on my way to leave my family that night. And that night, on the way to this meeting that would have destroyed my family, a car cut in front of my motorcycle. I swerved to avoid it. I lost control. I accelerated into the back of a truck. On the impact, I busted up my hip. I broke 4 or 5 ribs. I came within an inch of dying. And that night, as I rolled from my left to my right side, I was here and my right foot was over here. I had completely severed off the whole top of my right foot. And that was a very painful experience. But it was the greatest experience of my entire life. Because literally and figuratively, guys, I couldn't get up. I wanted to, but I couldn't, obviously. And that brought me to a point where I realized, as I was going in and out of consciousness, Tommy, if you die right now, you're going to hell. There was no preacher standing over me, banging me over the head with a Bible. My sin was convicting me. And I knew that I knew if I die right now, I'm not going to heaven. And with that story of my dad in mind, on the pavement in that moment, that realization, I cried out, God help me. Moments before that, I wanted nothing to do with him. For the 18 years prior to that, I wanted nothing to do with God. Because you're just like my father, uninterested, distant, far off, unable to be pleased. No way could I ever earn your love, so why even try? But that night, I had nowhere but up to look. And I cried out, God help me. And that night has changed my entire life.
Tom, I got chills. I'm speechless. We're so thankful. We're so grateful. Help me, Harris. What an incredible, incredible story.
Thanks for sharing, Tom. It's very interesting to hear the parallels between your and Dr. Scott's stories. Was there like a moment, you started the conversation with Romans 8:28. Was there a moment that you realized that you loved God, or that you, like, obviously you said you looked up and you knew you needed God, but was there something in your heart that told you you needed God, or were you aware that God was real before? Or how did that begin your relationship with the Lord?
Yeah, I think like many people in our world today, I knew of him, but I didn't know him.
Mm-hmm.
And really, Jeremiah 33:3 says, God says, call to me and I will answer you, and I will show you great and unsearchable things that you do not know. Seriously, guys, we are one call away. We are, God help me, that far away. And he started doing things in my life that started to show me that he was there. From a chaplain coming and visiting me and praying over the last rites and giving me a Bible in the hospital, to neighbors and family showering Carmen and the girls and I with love. But it was about 3 months later that some neighbors, I am here today because of the love of some neighbors, Dave and Grace Geske, Pat Pahacek, who encouraged me and invited me to go to an event at the Metrodome in 1995 called Promise Keepers. And that night, I rolled forward and actually invited Jesus to come into my life, not just to be some figure I've read about or a crucifix that I see on the wall every once in a while, but actually a living, breathing, loving friend who lives inside of me by the power of the Holy Spirit, who died for me and rose from the dead so that I could die to my old way and live for him now today. And I did that, and it's changed everything. Instead of being divorced with 2 kids, Carmen and I have now been married, like I said, 36 years, and we have 4 kids. We have 2 grandsons, and I hope that quiver, if any of my kids are listening, get going, okay? Because Papa wants more grandkids, okay? But I've dedicated the rest of my life to telling people about Jesus and helping people. You see, that night I couldn't get up myself off that pavement. I had to have police and EMTs come and help me move so that I could get better again. What they did is they went to my arm and they took out 2 veins and artery and all this muscle, and they used that actually to reattach my foot. I couldn't do that on my own. I needed help. And similarly, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life, is just come alongside people to help them get in a position to receive the healing and the transformation that Christ has for them.
That's pretty incredible. My conversation with Dr. Scott a few weeks back, he talked so much about, and it just has rung through my ears for weeks and weeks, that just admitting that you're not the king of your own life. And then I heard another quote the other day, and it was saying that the definition of humility is realizing there's a God and that God isn't you. And that is so evident through even just like the analogy of your situation, being stuck on the ground, lying, looking up to God, and just admitting that I'm not the king of my life. And that is inspiring. It brings me chills to just hear that that admission brings you a step closer to acknowledging God and starting that relationship.
But what a beautiful, beautiful spot to be in, because this world says it's all about you. The one who dies with the most toys wins. That you've got to keep climbing. You got to keep being all that you can become.
Well, even look at our modern society right now. I mean, what do we see on TV? What do we see in the movie theaters? It's always about who's the hero. You know, how can you be the hero of your own life? It's never stepping in and helping other people and being the heroes of their lives, and stepping and helping someone else be a hero. And that's really, really cool. And I'd like to get into that part of your story is, you know, how did you use that experience to impact others around you and do what you're doing now?
Yeah. You know, what's really cool is I learned that there's a huge difference between happiness and joy. Happiness is an external thing, where joy is an internal thing. I'm happy because of we get to have pot roast for dinner. I'm happy because it's sunny out. I'm happy because of all of this external stuff. Mm-hmm. But joy is an inside thing. When you may not have happy situations around you, but you still have joy on the inside. And one of the coolest things, Harris, that I found is that joy is spelled J-O-Y. There's no other way to spell it. It's got to be J-O-Y. Jesus first, others in the middle, yourself last. And I really find that when I put Christ first and I put you in front of me, I actually get promoted. I actually find myself being fulfilled and happier. And I go, hold it, I'm not supposed to feel this way. This is putting me in the front. I got to get to the back of the line again so you serve more people. And that's where the joy comes. And so what I did from that very first night when I gave my life to Christ, I felt his presence. And I just wanted to share life and love with everybody. And like Mother Teresa says, she said, let's go share the gospel with the whole wide world. And only when we have to, let's use words. Well, we have to share words, obviously. But I really think it's important for us to live a life of love. Love gives. John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son. So I try to give as much of myself as I can every day. Now, that sounds pretty noble of me. I will tell you, I'm a very selfish person, so I've got a lot of work to do in that area. But I really think when we try to live a life of joy, we will find ourselves living that out.
Tom, what amazes me, like with Dr. Scott, is you could have ran from the community, you could have continued upon a drug path, and you had a fork in the road, and you decided, I am going to choose purpose and service and Christ and making a difference in the lives of others. Back to Harris's question, then you decided post-accident, the night that you surrendered your life to Christ, you decided, I'm going to make a difference in the lives of others. Yeah. Take us on from the night of the accident to more of you deciding, I'm going to use this to change lives.
Yeah. From that night that I said, God help me, that was a big start. I mean, if any of the listeners say, I want a new start, God help me is a great place to start. He hears that prayer all the time. Call to me and I will answer you and I will show you great and unsearchable things that you do not know. I felt there was a difference. I saw the magnitude that drugs had in my life. I saw the magnitude that sin had in my life. But I could now also feel like there was some hope. Instead of feeling hopeless and helpless, I felt like there was hope. And I gave my life to Christ, and I said, you know what? I'm not going back there. That experience of feeling like I'm going to hell, and I'm not swearing, by the way, but it literally scared the hell out of me. It really did. I wanted nothing to do with that old life again. And I said, it has to start with me. I'm wanting this for me. I've had to go to some treatment programs and counselors in the past, but I was always doing it because the judges told me I had to, my parents told me I had to, my wife told me I had to. Now I'm doing this for me. That's where the kicker is. That's where Scott made the turn too. When he said, I'm doing it for Barb and the kids, but I'm doing it for me. That's how you're able to see a change. And I found that my job of working in finance, where I was always a man of integrity and hard work, it just wasn't fulfilling anymore. I wanted this whole world, everybody that I came in contact with, to know this guy named Jesus. And you see, I went from being a hopeless drug addict to being a drugless hope addict. And I wanted just to share that with everybody I came in contact with. And so 3 years after my motorcycle accident, I had just started going to church maybe a year earlier. The pastor of the church in Bloomington that I was going to saw an evangelistic gift in me. He saw an evangelistic need they had in their church, and he asked me to come on and be the director of evangelism. Well, I would go on to further studies and get my credentials and then my license, and then later, about 10 years later, getting ordained. And so I spent 15 years in public finance, and then I spent 15 years as a pastor at Cedar Valley Church in Bloomington, the old Bloomington Assembly. And that was an interesting transition of going from finance into being a pastor. But I just wanted to share the love of Christ with everybody.
God has used you in mighty ways. Mm-hmm. Tom, like most people, I know of people firsthand right here in our community that have lost their life to drugs and alcohol. And I'm thinking about those people, and I have them close in my heart as I speak. And the list is countless, and those people will never be forgotten. Tom, when we think of all the people in this world that struggle with drugs and alcohol, what's so fascinating to me is this affects everybody. And oftentimes, like you said, judging a book by its cover does not tell the whole story. Now, the podcast today, there's no judgment, there's no shame. Nobody's better than the next. Mm-mm. We're doing this to inform, to educate, to inspire. We're doing this to have impact, and we're so grateful for your story. Speak to the listeners in Leading Teen Challenge. Give them a picture of people that are walking through the doors that would probably surprise us, that are struggling with drugs and alcohol.
Yeah. I think there was a time where there was a stereotypical drug addict or alcoholic. That image does not exist today. It runs the entire gamut of people. Technology was supposed to free us, but I think social media, technology has actually hurt us, perhaps, where we now compare ourselves to so many other people or whatnot, that there's probably more depression, more anxiety, more hurt and pain than we're willing and wanting to admit today. And oftentimes, if people are unwilling to share those things, be vulnerable and transparent with those things and say, hey, I'm struggling, can you come alongside of me? They hold it in. And sometimes those things fester to the point that you need to self-medicate it with something, whether that is acting out sexually, whether it is acting out criminally, whether that is acting out taking drugs or alcohol, or gambling, or name it, overeating. The truth is, there is help. There is hope. And my desire is to put hope within reach of every Minnesotan. That's why we continue to grow at Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, because once again, I was a hopeless drug addict. Now I'm a 30-year drugless hope addict, and I believe that hope, if it can change and save me, it can change and save everybody. But we're seeing soccer moms, we're seeing teachers, we're seeing construction workers, we're seeing homeless people, we're seeing bankers, pastors' kids, pastors' wives. Drugs is no respecter of persons. And you don't have to be down and out either to become a drug addict anymore. We need to do pain management, and I'm sure Dr. Scott would love to talk to you about this at some point, about when people have surgeries, they have in the past at least given a lot of prescription for painkillers with no pain management associated with it, where you titrate off of that at a scaled off level, and it can get away from you. And oftentimes people find that I can no longer get my OxyContin or my hydrocortisone or whatever refilled, so they have to turn to illegal drugs. And that's when things spin out of control. So I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I answered your question exactly, but
no, you did, Tom, and kind of taking that an extra step, it just shocked me. The statistic you had said in an interview that I had listened to, that in 2022, 111,000 people just here in the U.S. lost their life to a drug overdose. And that statistic is staggering. You also went on to say without Narcan, that maybe would be 300,000, 400,000, 500,000. We want this to be positive today and hopeful, but this is a huge challenge, whether it's drugs or alcohol. And again, we all have struggles. And so I think we can all relate in life. Not always is it drugs or alcohol, but all of us as human beings have struggles. And so the goal is to encourage and bring hope. But I think we need to be honest with ourselves, and we need to kind of band arms together to learn more about this. That is a staggering statistic. Speak more to that, Tom, kind of a little bit of education for our listeners as to what you're trying to combat at Teen Challenge.
Yeah. I will say something that is perhaps controversial to some sectors of the public. I think the legalization of marijuana is one of the worst things the United States or any country could do. I think it's one of the worst things that the state of Minnesota could ever do. Whether people want to admit it or not, marijuana is a gateway drug. It is an introduction. You will not meet too many people that are heroin, cocaine, meth addicts that would not say my first use was marijuana. What it does is it brings down your fear of drugs, and it gets you hooked. And we call it chasing the dragon, where you always want to have something that's going to get you higher than the last time. We're never satisfied, if you will. What J.D. Rockefeller, I think, was the one that asked, how much money is enough? Just a little bit more. In drug addiction, it's kind of the same thing. How high is high? Well, just a little bit more. Well, that can be confronted. And right now, today, we need to take heed of that, because most drugs are being cut with a drug called fentanyl, and fentanyl is lethal. The amount of fentanyl that would fit on the tip of this pen is enough to kill someone. And what we're finding is that there are high school students that believe that they're getting Adderall or other prescription drugs that they don't have access to, but they're buying it from the street or whatnot. It's being pressed with fentanyl, and it's killing people. People that are at home numbing their hurt and their pain by just drinking at night and getting up and going to work and coming home, and now I'm lonely again, or I'm dealing with these issues, and then drinking themselves to passing out. These people are dying. More people die of seizures coming out of alcohol overdoses than drug addiction. Now think about that. Alcohol is legal. You can go buy it at a store that's open right now. More people will die coming off of an alcohol with overdose than off of another drug. And so these are things that we need to keep the awareness always alive.
So from my perspective, as kind of the youngest person here in the room, I'm kind of looking towards the next generation, for my generation, for friends of mine who have been addicts or have been a person addicted to drugs or alcohol. And what would approach be to approach this before it culminates in an addiction? You talked about your struggles as a child. Is there like practical ways that, I mean, I know you've talked about counselors and stuff, but ways that people can approach the situation before it gets out of hand, before they're in need of the Narcan or treatment?
Yeah, I think if you are a person that is sensing that you're losing control, if you will, to say the most important words, I need help. To find that trusted person and to say, hey, I need help. Help is out there. Sometimes we always think we got this on our own until we find out we don't. I really think asking for help is a huge, huge thing. But similarly, if you are thinking that someone may have a problem or there's a situation that could lend to it, friends, this is where we need to get involved. Oh, it's not my business. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to meddle in their business. As one who wishes somebody would have meddled, meddle. Get involved. Say something. Express your concern. And there's ways that you can do it lovingly and appropriately. But if someone is truly an addict, they don't know how to get the help. And typically they either have to have an accident like I had, an overdose, or an arrest. And sometimes that can be too late.
Tom, I'd like you to speak more to that. What encouragement do you have for families? As you said, they don't want to meddle. And it's fascinating to me now, when you look at your story backwards, you just wish someone would have meddled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Obviously, in a couple minutes, we're so excited to encourage people about Teen Challenge and the life-saving and changing work you're doing there. But with your own personal story and now leading Teen Challenge, what encouragement do you have for families that might be listening to this and they have a loved one in their life?
Yeah. At graduations, the graduate, I like to say the former addict, now the hope addict, will always express, I'm thankful for this police officer. I'm thankful for my grandma who got involved. I'm thankful for my parent or my child who said something. It's the exact opposite of what we think it's going to be. Oh, they're going to hate me. They're probably going to say things that will hurt you in the initial bit. That's to be expected. But if we want to express love, we need to speak our mind in the midst of it. The truth is, an addict is dying, and they're going to die. And if you have a chance to say something, get involved, you have the chance to save a life, literally. And I don't know of a better way to spend your life than helping someone find freedom and transformation.
I love that, Tom, to speak up, to get involved, to try to put that courage ahead of your fear, because at the end of the day, more than likely that person is going to be so grateful that you got involved. Tom, you've worked your plan. You talk about working your plan for 30 years. For the person struggling, maybe it's drugs, maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's a different struggle. For the person struggling, for Tom, what is winning the day? What does working your plan look like? And maybe the person is now in recovery, but tell us a little bit about working your plan. What is success and transformation and winning the day? What does that look like for you?
Well, okay, so May 18th, I celebrated 30 years sober. On the back of my phone is my sobriety plan, and I have to look at it most days. So I'm going to be really transparent. Amen?
Please do.
I am tempted to use most days. You hear that? I'm not one of those guys that had all of my desires, all of my cravings taken away. I'm not. I I I am tempted to use most days, but I will not. And part of my plan is a number of years ago. In fact, it's interesting that we were talking about the Olympics earlier, because it was actually at the Olympics that the Lord gave this to me, because I was invited by a number of NHL players to go to the Canadian players, the Molson Golden House, for a party with all these NHL players that I just looked up to. But I chose my family, I chose my Lord, and I chose my sobriety over that. And I believe it's 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. It says, "Be sober and alert. The devil prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour." And I know sober means be humble, but I'm going to take it as be sober. And he says, be alert. One of the first lessons you learn in hockey is to keep your head up. If you lower your head, you're going to get flattened. And so similarly, if you're having a challenge with alcohol or drugs, you have to stay alert. You have to keep your head on a swivel. You have to always be present with that. And so what God did is he gave me the word alert. That's what's on the back of my phone. It's just in big, bold, red letters, alert. And it's an acrostic, okay? It stands for A, admit you have a problem. Oftentimes I will say, Tommy, don't even think about that. You got a problem with that. Sometimes that's not enough. And I got to go to the L, which stands for look away right away. The longer I look at that piece of chocolate cake, the more I'm going to want it, right? Well, sometimes if I'm in a situation where I want to have a drink, I need to leave this situation, and I need to leave it now. Don't linger. Don't last. Sometimes that's not enough, and that's where the E really has helped me a lot, and that stands for engage. The opposite of engage is disengage. It means to separate, to be alone, or to be out of connection. I have found that back when my son was young, saying, hey, buddy, let's go out and shoot some baskets or throw the ball. That's been good. Carmen, let's go for a walk. Hey, Harris, could you pray for me? To actually engage in it. So it's admit you have a problem, look away right away, engage. But then the R is remember the cost. Oftentimes, we are very impulsive people, and we will remember the cost after we've incurred it. Well, what if we would do a timeout before we actually incurred the cost, and we remembered the cost on the front end? Oh my goodness. That's going to take me farther than I want to go. It's going to keep me longer than I want to stay, and it's going to cost me more than I want to pay. All right, I don't want that. Then the T is turn to God. Turn to God. Now, you'd think that would be the first thing, right? Well, that wouldn't spell alert, but also I think that represents the fact that all of us are human, and we have to burn through our own humanity before we finally get to a point of humility like I had to on the pavement and turn to God and say, I need you. I need help. So that's what I do every day. My alert plan.
That's amazing. What I think is really remarkable about that is you never said that your desires changed. Your desires are still the same. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, is they pretend or they hope or they ask God to change their desires rather than being willing to change their actions. And it's just remarkable to see that amidst those desires, you use your energy, you turn those desires to help people in the same situation turn to God. And I think that is really remarkable and shows a lot to young people, especially on how do you act on these desires? Do you fulfill the desires, or do you use what God is calling of your life to fulfill God's purpose for your life?
Yeah.
As Harris said, thank you for your vulnerability. Tom, I'm crazy proud of the man of God that you are. I am crazy proud of Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge and crazy proud of the leader that you are. You are so humble, so inspiring, and you've done kingdom work that can never be measured. And I know I speak for countless people. Speak to the family members, the listeners. Maybe they know someone that needs Teen Challenge. Maybe they don't. But someday, I think in all of our lives, sadly, your faith-based rehabilitation center that we're so proud of, we need you. Hopefully, we're going to need you less in time. Hopefully, you're out of a job someday, Tom.
Come on, that'd be awesome.
But Tom, we need you. I don't want you to hold back. What a staple of Minnesota. What a staple in this world. You have no idea your impact. That's what's so cool about you. You have a tremendous impact, and you just give all glory to God, and you've completely used your story to help the lives of others. For the people that don't know much about Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, tell us more. Tell us what you're proud of. Tell us about the difference it makes in the lives of others.
Yeah. We are like an emergency room. We are like the place that I needed to go the night of my motorcycle accident. They weren't just going to help me up to my feet and dust me off and send me on my way. I wouldn't have made it. Teen Challenge is a place where you can find peace, where you can find help, and where you can find hope. And our program is primarily made up of a short-term program, which is like an emergency room where we stabilize you. It's anywhere from 30 to 60 to 90 days, perhaps. It's enough to stabilize you. That's what Dr. Scott talked about. It's a time for you to really get your focus back on what the priorities in life are. Now, somebody that's been an addict for decades, you're not going to typically spin dry in 30, 60, 90 days. And that's where you may need our long-term program, which is 13 months. We are not faith-based. We are Christ-centered. And that's the difference. There's a lot of faiths out there, and many faiths will not take you where you want to go. Jesus Christ will take you where you want to go. And we have those short-term and long-term programs all across the state. We have a Duluth campus for men. We have a Brainerd campus, which has both men and women. We have a Lakeside Academy, which is for teen boys. Then in Alexandria, we just opened up in November a facility for men. In the Buffalo area, we have a new model. It's called Rockbridge. It is for working men and women, working adults. But then we have Rochester, which I opened in 2014. It's a men's and a women's center. And then one of our latest campuses is in Mankato. It's called Welcome Manor, and it's with women with children. These beautiful mothers have it the hardest. If I say I need help, they run the risk of losing their children. If they don't have their child back and they want to, and they say I need help, they run the risk of not getting their child back. Well, we've created a venue where the mother can come and get the help that she needs, while at the same time caring for her child and being coached as to how to be a parent. And it's a phenomenal site. Right now, today, we have 1,131 beds available in the state of Minnesota to help people find hope in Christ.
What is the difference between Minnesota Adult Teen Challenge and other treatment opportunities? Obviously, you said you're Christ-centered. Do you have to be a Christian to be involved? And what is the difference between you and maybe other options?
Yeah, that's a great question, Harris. you don't have to be a Christian to come into our program, nor do you have to be one to graduate. But just so you know, the programming will be focused on faith in Christ. It's kind of like going to a Chinese restaurant and ordering spaghetti. They just don't serve that there, okay? You got to want to have Chinese food, okay? Same thing here. We have so many people that come and go, we don't want Jesus. We don't want this God thing. And then they find out, you know what? That's exactly the piece that I was missing. And so we don't shove it down people's throats, but this is who we are. We believe that this is the way, the truth, and the life. And it is just amazing to see how many of our staff, I mean, the huge number of our staff, probably 40% of our staff are graduates of our program. Men and women that had no meaning, no purpose, no calling in their life, and all of a sudden they find themselves doing the very thing that God wired them to do. Kind of like I feel like I have. And it's the best.
Tom, it's so fun to listen to you. Your heart, you are on fire for the Lord. You're on fire for hope. You're on fire for Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge. You're on fire for making a difference in the lives of others. And you're wired to do this work. And we're so incredibly grateful. And on behalf of all of us, thank you for who you are, the work you do, the lives you change and save. On the One Pebble podcast, we want to give you a couple last pebbles. We call them pebbles of encouragement or whatever you would like to say. I will say that with Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, I would just like to have you speak to how people can give. Maybe they want to volunteer. Maybe they want to be a mentor. Every dollar makes a difference. Every volunteer makes a difference. Every prayer makes a difference or good thought. And so there is ways to get involved. And we don't have to be a Tom. We don't have to be the CEO, but we can get involved. We can throw our own pebbles. We can make a difference. So speak to the listeners about ways that they can get behind the work you're doing. And again, prayer is equally appreciated. And then I want you to throw out the last pebble to the addict, the person that's listening, and some parting words for them.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I was at Rochester Assembly, and then the next week I was at Wilmer Assembly, and I shared the same message at those churches. As CEO, I found out a way for us to receive all of the funding that we need without ever having to ask for a donation, never have to have another gala or choir outing or what have you. And that is very truly this. If we take Jesus out of our program, we actually get all the funding that we need from state, federal government, and private grants that are out there. But I'll tell you, if that's what we need to do, then we might as well just shut our doors. The difference between our success rate, as proven by the Wilder study, which is 80% success rate, and what we understand the success rate of a secular program of 32%, that delta, that 50% delta, that's Jesus. And I would rather humble myself and ask you to help me financially than to take Jesus out of the program. So I can tell you, as long as I am the CEO of Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, we will never take Jesus out of our program. Never. We have to raise $2,124 per month per man and woman that's in our long-term program. We only fundraise for the Christ-centered long-term program because that's where we need our help. And it costs over $2,000 a month. And right now we have 300, 400, 500 men, women in our long-term program. So you can run the math and imagine how needed funds are. But we also need mentors. When I came to faith in Christ at 31 years old, I didn't know meant to be a godly man, a godly husband, a godly father, a godly employee. I had men come alongside of me to mentor me. Our men and women need other men and women just to mentor them and just be a friend. And so we have a website. It's www.mntc.org. And there's an opportunity for you to become a mentor, a volunteer, or to give financially. And to your listeners, I need to tell you, we need your support. We really do. I believe that's one of the reasons why the Lord allowed me to be connected with you guys for the One Pebble podcast. And for the person that's out there struggling, I know you don't know me, but I want to tell you I love you. I believe in you. You can do this. You can overcome. Revelation 12:11 says, we have overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb, that's Jesus, and the word of our testimony. And the word of our testimony is the challenges that we've gone through. And as a result, you can become what is in 2 Corinthians 5:17, which says, if anyone is in Christ, there's a new creation. The old is gone and the new has come. And what I love about that is it doesn't say that you're rehabbed, you're patched up, you're kind of put together. No, it says you're a new creation and the old is gone. And so, as one person who had to receive somebody's love, I hope you'll receive me just telling you that I love you and I believe in you and you can do this. And if we can be of help, please know that you can call 612-FREEDOM, 612-FREEDOM, and we have a loving staff that will be there to take care of you.
Thank you for the hope and the time you've given us today, Tom. I hope your message and story reaches the world. It's really remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. We're grateful.
Thank you, everyone.
This has been the One Pebble Podcast. One pebble, so many ripples. What will you do to make a difference?